I was actually going to ask on this one with Neuralink, do we have an 11? Because I think that this is going beyond Skynet, potentially.
Right. Okay. I really should be more worried than I probably am.
Resistance is futile.
Welcome to the podcast,
Where we explore what's happening with AI, business, automation and culture, and ask,
where on earth is all this going?
Jamie, welcome back. This is like almost a special episode, only because something very AI adjacent, related, but
Yes.
big news in the space happened this week. The first human to be implanted with a Neuralink brain-computer interface is an unidentified individual, as per the company's announcement. But this milestone event was spearheaded by Elon Musk's Neuralink, a neurotechnology company. Yes. Now, we aren't going to talk so much about Musk, although there will have to become an episode where we do talk about Musk because he is the elephant in the room when it comes to AI. But because we want to do a shorter one just to jump on this issue, we want to look at how it's possible to talk about Neuralink, at this point in time where it is now, and maybe look forward to the sort of implications of this technology where it relates to AI and perhaps some of the implications culturally and all sorts of other ways, to be honest, that it could have. So for those who really don't know the practicalities, it's a super small chip like a coin. It can help doctors understand how the brain works. It's also hoped that one day it can help people who can't move their bodies or talk to communicate using their thoughts. It's a bit like having a magical helper in your brain that can help you do amazing things. But then we probably thought smartphones were just these amazing little They are still very clever, but nonetheless, there are also other sides to this technology as we found out. So,
I'm terrified already.
Let's start, as we generally do, with a look at the scale of Skynet versus Knight Rider.
Yeah.
And for those unfamiliar, just a back of the envelope kind of snapshot for somebody to understand how our scale of concerns versus euphoria works.
Yeah, so effectively we have a little scale, whereas when we look at a new technology, whether it's AI or something like Neuralink, we rate it based on, I think it's safe to say, kind of 80s sci-fi kind of films and scenarios. And as you said, Dave, Skynet being number 10, and then we've got things down the scale, and you go into like C-3PO and R2-D2. There's things which are good technology. They're helpful. They might be a bit stupid, but that's it. So I was actually going to ask on this one with Neuralink, do we have an 11? Because I think that this is going beyond Skynet, potentially.
Right. Okay. I really should be more worried than I probably am. If I look back on this podcast in a few years and go, why was I remotely chuckling at this idea? Yeah, I think this one is in the so unknown that it is quite scary, but also it does have big potential upsides if we can get it right. And I wonder if it's just in the cowboy territory of not understanding the technology well, and it being implemented badly at the beginning, which often happens with really new technology, that we should be worried about things, but also we should be able to see if there's precedence for how we react to it.
Well, it's kind of I was thinking just in terms of precedence. If you think about, it's very topical at the moment in the news with social media and some pretty nasty things that have been happening linked to social media. And again, I keep coming back to this thing where this technology is just left to naturally go its own way. And in the main part, it's good. But I think people are really starting to look at things like social media, even mobile phones, particularly for children and stuff like this, and starting to think, have we got this right? Or we've opened a Pandora's box, and do the benefits really outweigh some of the negative sides? And I'm worried that that's fine. Okay, it's one thing if it's the internet, it's one thing if it's social media and a mobile phone, but a chip implanted in your brain that could potentially control you or do all kinds of things, I don't know. I'm just very worried about that just being left to find its own way.
Yeah, let the market work it all out. But I think we have got to a stage in our technological development where it does feel very much like we're just told to lump it. Here's the future. Bosh.
Yeah.
These are the things you're having. Hope you like it. If you don't, tough luck. And of course, we don't get to vote for innovations because we can't know what is possible, right?
Well, we don't know.
That's a common refrain, at least from technologists. But that's not good enough on its own, it seems, and especially with this one. It feels very much like, we could do this. Should we do it? Should we be having more of a debate about it? I think that's what triggers a lot of people with this one, is like, why is it that these sorts of things are not considered as part of a public debate before it's even funded?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I've never really thought about that. Why don't we get any kind of say in this type of stuff? I mean, there's loads of good things about all this technology, but it's something that is, if we were to rewind 30 years and go to the internet and maybe if there was a bit more of a kind of a public forum about this, would it look the way it looks now? I mean, obviously we don't know or didn't know some of the bad sides of it, but it does feel like there needs to be a little bit of some guardrails or some safety net. And I know the utopians and the California, there's actually an interesting theory about this, that the reason that a lot of these things kind of are so out of control is because this kind of utopian West Coast California hippie movement, which is where a lot of this kind of came out of originally, the original kind of Steve Wozniak and all this kind of hippie thinking, that actually that's kind of led us down this path, and that's why they fight so hard against, I'm talking about the Metas and the Googles and things like that. They
Was
fight
Steve
so
Wozniak
hard.
a hippie? He's not the person that comes to mind when I think hippie straight away. But are you saying that Steve Wozniak
So
is...
I think if you were to go back in the kind of the history, there's this thing that was called the Whole Earth Catalogue, which was this kind of 1960s publication at the time, and I believe that's where him and Steve Jobs that's where that all started, and it is that hippie movement that started on the west coast of America, that really still kind of controls the attitudes and things of the companies that run, and probably the funders. We talked about is it Peter Thiel, kind of one of the guys who works with Elon Musk, and it's just
it's a thing, but it's also
about.
it's a cultural human thing too, to search for utopias. We haven't, it's not completely new, but it's supercharged by Silicon Valley for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what I'll do, I think, is I'll give you my 3 positive, hopes, because last time we started on the negatives of the issue we're talking about, and I think this week, let's be a bit more fair and give ourselves the hopeful things first, and then you can demolish them with your scenarios that you've discovered about things that could possibly go wrong and take us to 11. All right, so the first one I want to look at is human AI synergy. Here's a scenario where Frank, an artist with a chip in his head, right, collaborates directly with AI to create unique art pieces by merging his creativity with AI's computational power, illustrating a sort of new era in our AI collaboration and creativity. So that is quite possible and believable because people are already using AI in art. So that doesn't seem much of a stretch. The next one is perhaps more hopeful and possibly more urgent: enhanced human abilities through
Superhumans.
a scientist called Emma. Yeah. Let's call her Emma. She's got a brain chip. You've got to have some women in here. Can't just have all blokey blokes.
We're modern men, Dave. We're modern men.
Modern men. I suspect, though, the first person who had this thing put in his brain last week was a bloke, wasn't it? Yeah, go on. 100%. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah,
honestly.
Exactly. 100%.
A scientist. So Emma has got a brain chip, and she's a scientist. She processes complex data at incredible speeds, leading to breakthroughs in climate change research, showcasing the potential for enhanced problem-solving abilities. We need that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If that was the case, then we would want that, but we would, of course, have to be aware of the downsides, which you're going to go through.
Isn't there a film about that? Wasn't there the Limitless? Wasn't that about this? Where you take
but
a
it
pill
wasn't about,
effectively?
Yeah, it was a pill, yeah.
Yeah.
And you become supercharged.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I'm like, I want that pill. How do I get one of those?
Yeah, sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up. So, yeah, what could possibly go wrong? I'd be fine. I'd be way more responsible than everybody else with it, of course.
Of course.
And the last scenario that's positive is, let's take Graham. He's paralyzed from an accident. He uses the brain chip to control a computer, enabling him to write a book using just his thoughts, demonstrating the life-changing potential for disabled individuals. But, of course, he could also control his limbs potentially as well. So those are the sorts of really hopeful things that people have in mind when they think of Neuralink. But I now want you to paint some pictures for us, because you've got a few scenarios of the things that could possibly take us to 11 on the Skynet versus not.
So I love what you've talked about, Emma and Graham. I think they would gain from it. I'm slightly concerned about the AI creativity side of things. I don't know why this makes me kind of think of hallucinogenic drugs. You could probably just fast track by dropping a tab of acid and get a similar kind of effect, but what do I know about these things?
Well, people did, and that also had really detrimental effects, but they used it as a catalyst. I mean, David Bowie was pretty famous, I think, for saying that he owed a lot to drugs, but he didn't say, I would take it back and not do them either. He said, I can't think of my creativity originally without them, but he didn't keep using them for the creativity, but it was a catalyst for him.
Yes.
So I don't know. I don't think it's escapable. I think it's going to get used in some way.
Do you know about this the stoned ape theory?
No, go on.
The theory that apes back in the day, whilst we were kind of Neanderthal-y type people, they found some hallucinogenic mushrooms or something like that. They ate them, and this gave them a vision into what could possibly happen and what we could do, and that was the trigger that made humanity move on to the next level. So maybe we're a new version of that with the Neuralink.
Oh, wow. Like a 2001 Space Odyssey type. Instead of discovering the obelisk, they discover drugs.
Magic mushrooms. Yes. There was also an exhibition. There was an exhibition at the V&A a couple of years ago, which was all about the 1960s and the immense change that happened during the 1960s. And the conclusion at the end of this exhibition was that it was because everyone had got stoned and done hallucinogenic drugs, and that was the trigger for a new level of creativity. So maybe Neuralink could be the new level of creativity, or a new way of having insights and visions on things that we can't just do on our own.
Well, okay, yeah. So, before we move on to the miserable side of things that you're going to
I'm bringing some positivity.
You're bringing some positivity. It's Einstein. Einstein gets a lot of quotes attributed to him that might not be, but I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines of
don't do Neuralink.
Problem cannot be solved using the same mindset that created the problem. It's not exactly that, but that was the gist of it. And I wonder if there is that possibility, that emerging of human mind and AI enhanced intelligence might be required for us to frankly get out of a lot of the complicated scenarios that we're in. And that's a hope, I know. That's not a guarantee. But so on that note, positive note, let's dive into the possible problems.
Okay, so the first one. I love this. Okay, so this is, let's call this control lost. So I want you to picture the scene. We're about 25 years down the line, and basically the security protocols of Neuralink have been breached by cybercriminals. And because Neuralink has moved on to such a point where effectively you can get it to do things just by thinking, do this, do that, and whatever. The cybercriminals have gained control, and they are manipulating humans to do things which they don't want to do. So, for example, commit crimes, murders, robbery, or all kinds of things. And the problem is that when someone does that crime, and unbeknown to them, it's been programmed into them by the Neuralink, they get committed for this crime. They have to go to jail or whatever it is, but they didn't commit the crime. It's a bit like those bugs. You remember I've seen on one of these wildlife programs where I think some weird wasp thing kind of injects something into another bug, and that bug it messes with its brain waves, and it goes up and crawls up a tree and lays the eggs of the wasp in the tree. Sounds like that.
Effectively controls them. And it was the scenario that was used in The Last of Us. There was the idea that suddenly it happened to humans. And humans were now controlled by this bug, this fungus.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe Elon Musk will be the fungus.
Okay, he's been called a lot worse, I think. So, okay.
So that's that one. So that's kind of control loss. The other one was, let me find it here. So yeah, so this is a kind of dependence dystopia. So this is where we really embrace Neuralink. It's enhancing everything that we do, the way that we communicate with each other, all these types of things. But unfortunately, a catastrophic failure occurs in the central Neuralink system. So we were talking earlier.
Would it ever be central? We have nothing that's central anymore. But anyway, okay, I digress.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Well, someone will be controlling it.
We'll go with it.
We'll go with it. So I want you to picture the scene, Dave. You've got kids, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah, two teenagers,
okay.
heavily dependent on technology as well.
Yeah, as do I. Okay, so imagine the scene when the internet stops working. Okay, it's carnage, it's chaos.
God.
Yeah,
I have done that.
So,
it was chaos.
They lose the
done that
ability
in
to
this house.
communicate. You know, they literally
lose the
don't know
ability
what
to
to do.
speak.
Yeah, don't know how to speak. The thumbs they start twitching. It's a horrible. So imagine that on a much bigger scale where all of us are connected via our brains and we've become so dependent on it that when that thing gets turned off, we no longer know how to operate. We don't know how to communicate with each other. We don't know how to, all the machinery, all the things that we use are controlled by this as well. So that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, that does sound terrifying. However, there is precedent for being concerned about that, and it's to do with the solar flares that could wipe out, kind of like an EMP bomb. You could have a solar flare that's so powerful that it disrupts our electricity grid completely, and the internet goes down. Or the internet as we know it. It's only left in patches. So that is that scenario is being war gamed as we speak. It is a problem. Potentially.
I mean, we kind of see it already, like just joking aside, if the internet goes down, in your house, I mean, I've had it, I've been working from home and I've got some calls lined up or whatever, the internet just breaks for some reason. And you're just like, I can't do anything. Or have you had a power cut recently at any point for an hour?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And you're like
back in the 50s even, you would have been fine. So the power goes out, the lights are out, and you can't turn on a vacuum cleaner, maybe if you've got one. But now... Yeah, nothing will work.
No
There's
Netflix, nothing.
Netflix aside, everything is somehow connected to the internet for some sort of, if you little thing you could drive to the shops and still get food. Of course you can, but eventually that's going to stop arriving at shops because it's all through logistics, which is all internet connected. Stuff doesn't just turn up without help of the internet. So it's a big problem.
So this is a worry. And then there's another one here, which is the kind of a socioeconomic divide. So ultimately, it will be people who can afford to have these Neuralink things done, and because of that will enhance and augment their abilities. And poorer people will not be able to have these things done, so they'll just have human abilities rather than superhuman abilities, and this divide, which already exists massively, is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger, leading probably to civil unrest and all kinds of nasty stuff. So
you could just see kids at school, like if a kid turned up with one of them on and had better cognitive abilities, that's the scenario where you would get bullying, but you would get bullying because that's a disadvantage. Like kids who can't afford that must be able to see that to them it looks like cheating. Yes, there's nothing God-given if you to excuse the term, if you're not religious, say. But the point is, nature-given or whatever, it feels somehow fair that someone's bright or whatever. But when it's just an added brain that you can afford or your parents can, that feels different, doesn't it? So I don't know how we cope with that.
No, it made me think of another thing actually, which is that, again, very topical at the moment, kind of bullying on social media and things like that. So if you go back to when we were kids, if you got bullied at school, you'd leave the school gates and go home and you knew you were safe at home. There was, you couldn't be touched by the bullies. But now everyone's got their phones, everyone's got social media, so it just continues at home. Now imagine that going into your brain. Literally you've got this, the bullying can continue, like just insidiously in your brain.
Well, I wonder if the first thing that would get developed this time round, if it's a new form of internet connection, if you see what I mean, is the firewall, the brain wall, so that you get to choose what comes and goes. But I know what you mean. If it's going to be internet fed, which it would need to be surely for, I presume, then there's a whole layer of technology there that I don't think exists yet. So
no.
I don't know. You would know better than me the sort of skills and the sort of layers of development that would be required to make that remotely safe. I don't know what would go into that. How would you firewall a brain?
They can barely firewall a network at the moment.
I don't even know what that means that I've said it. So
yeah, but because I guess the challenge is that on a network, when you're without getting technical about it, you're working within
you have to get technical
parameters.
About it.
Okay. So on a network, you're working within known parameters. Yeah, you can say, okay, here's a firewall. Here's lots of ports that things can come in on. We're going to block them. Yet you wouldn't know what those ports, the ports into the brain. I mean, we're going down a rabbit hole here. Impossible.
So basically, at least from what we know at the moment about how this technology works, when it interacts with something like the brain, it's impossible, or at least we haven't developed a way to think about it or conceptualize it.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at the moment. And I don't know, when I think about these things, I think about, they talk about the idea is that it's brilliant. You'll be able to just think what you want onto the page in front of you, then it'll just start typing. But I mean, I think a lot of crap, to be honest. And how is it going to filter that? And then when you communicate, imagine a scenario, Dave, where we're not even talking on microphones and things, and we're just connecting our brains. That's a scary concept right there. That we could be. I don't want to see. I don't want to see inside your brain.
You definitely don't want to see inside here. So, I know what you're saying. I don't know that that's what happens immediately with this technology, but I presume you will get a lot of noise in there. I mean, I don't know about you. I do meditation to a point. I'm no guru, but I do it enough because I know the basic premise, which is, for anybody who's never tried meditation, is you're meant to bring your mind back to stillness, but it doesn't work like that. In reality, what happens is you try to make your brain not think anything just for a period of time. And most of the exercise is noticing when your brain wanders off.
Correct.
And trying to bring it back to just calm and just listening to your breathing, right? So that's in principle what it is. And all I've known all the years of been doing this is my brain just will not shut up with just stuff. So how do you filter that noise out of this thing? I mean, I don't know how far ahead of the technology we are, but you're right. I don't know how you filter that out. There's a load of stuff in there that's just gobbledygook.
Well, and then I suppose if we really want to get into the sci-fi realm, you then get into the thought police, because imagine if they're trying to hunt for terrorists,
pre-crime.
who might be trying to pre-crime. Yeah.
Yeah, so Minority Report. Yeah, I wondered about this. I actually thought one of your scenarios was going down the Minority Report route. So go on.
So the idea being that the idea being that they're trying to prevent crime by stopping it happening before it happens, and one of the ways to do that would be to monitor, a little bit like the way they monitor the internet. They monitor emails. Whoever it is, the powers that be. It's all kind of filtering through something. The same thing could happen to our brainwaves. So it would be, if you're thinking about something that could be considered criminal, could that be enough to prosecute you? You're having bad thoughts, Dave. Bad thoughts.
There's going to be so much trouble for me. I'm never plugging in to one of these things. But I'm. Yeah, that's on the scale of the 11, right? That's the one that because of the unknown with that. It's the very idea of being connected to thoughts, and that thoughts themselves should not be part of the... It's an ethical thing, isn't it? It's like thoughts should not be considered part of the real world. We should be able to have them, and they're not out in the world automatically. That we almost... Thoughts are... they're not because they're not fully formed, and because our brains almost need to be able to think of.
Well, I'll give you a different analogy, right? So a thing I think about a lot, and for a long time I've thought about a lot, is that since the advent of the internet and particularly mobile phones, the gatekeepers of the world have been removed. So, for example, and I don't know why I always use pornography as this example, but it's the best example, is that as I think I may have talked about it on the previous podcast, if you wanted to in the past have kind of get a pornographic magazine, for example, you used to have to trot down to the newsagent, be brave enough to ask them, to pay for it, take it off the top shelf, and that's it. Fine. And to do that, you're an adult, and they would say, oh, are you over 18? And that's it. That's now changed with the advent of the internet. It was one thing because it would be on the home computer, but then it moved to the mobile phone. So now anyone who's of any age on their phone within one click can access what you used to only be able to get from the newsagent.
Which was intended for adults to...
Correct.
You're an adult. You need to now, if you can handle it, fine, but you're an adult, so therefore... But now it's like, no, your brain is not necessarily ready for that. No gatekeeper for it at all.
There's no gatekeeper, and that happens with all kinds of things, and the dark web as well kind of gives access to a whole load of stuff that it shouldn't do. And thinking about thoughts and what you were just describing there before, is that effectively... Are we removing the gatekeeper of our own mind to the thoughts that are coming out rather than what goes in? The company, the Googles and the Metas, I imagine, would very much like to know our thoughts, because then they'll know what we want to buy and how we want to spend our money. So it's of great value to them to know what we're thinking about the whole time. But as you said, they're not fully formed. Most of the time, we're all thinking about a load of shit half the time. And, it has no value, and it's us. It's literally in our heads. And I'm not sure.
And also,
I'm not sure.
I think there's a reverse scenario there in which, how do we know that we can't be subliminally encouraged to do certain things either? So there's that. I mean, it's in the category of technology that I don't know for sure, but it's like some aspects of it, you're like, let's not have this. This might be one of the first times out of all the things we've talked about, I really felt like there are aspects of this that are not healthy. And you need to prove first that they're healthy over a long period of time before they become part of society. So I feel a bit of a Luddite there, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. I'd rather be proved wrong than, actually, I really don't want to be right about this one. But it just seems to me that there's just not enough consideration of the serious implications of this stuff, and we need to get ahead of it before it becomes an inevitable technology, which is usually how these things occur.
Yeah, absolutely. And as with a lot of these things, who's driving this and what are the motives behind them driving this? The whether it's Elon Musk or whoever it is, and is government, is the nation state, do they really understand themselves what the implications are, and are they motivated correctly to really kind of keep a check on this, rather than it feels very much with the internet and social media that the horse has already bolted, and now they're kind of retrospectively trying to figure out what to do, and they're doing it very badly and very slowly, whereas we could do it the other way around.
Politics in general and democracy as well is an analog thing in a digital world. I mean, it is incredibly slow, legislation generally, to catch up with these things, and it's not like it has to automatically be legislated out of existence, but the idea that it can exist for sometimes a decade before it's seriously scrutinized as needing legislation seems very odd, and and also things move faster now than they ever have. So when I think of our democratic structures and our level of political debate on these issues and how slow they are, when you think that, to be honest, most of the time, House of Lords in the UK, for example, tends to have better debates because they actually have experts in there than the House of Commons, who actually decides these things. That's kind of worrying too, because the House of Lords doesn't have any clout. So I think it's a question of there's a layer of democracy to me that's missing, not just for just to solve Neuralink sort of stuff, but it was Suleiman's book that really got me thinking about this more seriously, because, I mean, as democracy goes, I'm like it sounds stupid to say this, and I shouldn't have to say it, but I'm a big cheerleader for democracy, but we don't seem to have enough people being like that. Everyone's like, maybe democracy sort of had its day, or maybe we don't need it that much. We can still vote for stuff every 4 years. But with things like this, we actually need to have structures that are different to our 4-year elections, where we have perhaps community engagement, perhaps what with sort of town hall meetings, which is what Suleiman was talking about, or even sortitions, where we start to examine these issues better and engage with them, much like the Irish did recently with the referendum on abortion. That was a huge democratic success. It's not talked about enough, but it was a model for the sorts of ways that we could address things like this and say, hang on a minute, people want to actually have a say on how this gets developed, please. This is not just a technological issue.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. They could have a referendum, because that worked really well last time.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the Irish had a referendum like adults, and it's not so as far as I can see, having the amount of engagement in the community in democratic forums and not just spewed out through the media who have their own agenda was a very mature way to engage the public.
It's interesting actually what you said about kind of town halls and things like that. Again, this is an area where, again, if we go back, and I don't always like to go back and think kind of look through rose-colored spectacles, but if you go back to kind of pre-internet days or early internet days, actually, the only way really to get people together would have been to like a town hall, gather people together, humans together, talking and debating about such things. Whereas now a lot of that goes online. And when you have these kind of online forums, as you see with anything like Twitter or anything like that, it because people are virtually anonymous, it just becomes a slagging match, and it just becomes who can shout the loudest. And a
snapshot of a Neuralink type world where if you can be anonymous as well as being brain linked, I mean, that's just
But
I don't want trolls in my head. They're bad enough as it is.
Yeah, but in terms of kind of debating these things, it feels like we do need to get a little bit more human in all this now. Kind of actually getting people together and talking about this and humanity deciding what happens rather than us all just kind of banging away on keyboards.
So maybe analog for you is the future of democracy, whereas I think it needs to be digital, or at the very least a mixture, because of the scale and the need for people to be involved, where if they need to go to a town hall, they might not go, but they will if they can get onto an app that allows them to have a voice.
But maybe a way of getting onto I think there's probably a happy medium. So whether that is a Zoom meeting
You're
or
such
a Teams
a centrist dad.
Do you know the only way to resolve all of this is for a benevolent dictatorship? I think is, and I'm putting my name forward. So
yeah. Well done, Jamie. You got in first. Right, we've got a benign dictator over here. Everyone vote for Jamie.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine. We do need an 11, don't we, on the scale?
Yes.
Jamie in charge with a Neuralink. Sorry, what was the halfway house? Not halfway house. That sounds like a madhouse. The middle ground.
It was the middle ground. Is I think technology would be good for the actual kind of the logistics of the voting and the engagement, but actually humans being humans and talking, whether that's by Zoom, we're all quite comfortable doing it that way, but rather than faceless debate and just keyboard warrior debate, I think this could be a better way. It brings the humanity back into some pretty inhuman things that we're talking about.
I like that. Well, I think we're going to be watching this space more and more as things develop, because it does seem to be a pretty fast developing space, and it is, I know, in between AI and biotech. Biotech is the other big exponential space, which of course is going to be related in many ways.
Yes.
But if I think of exponential type technologies that we're now surrounded by, I think solar, battery storage, I think AI, and I think biotech, and this one crosses over between those last two really nicely. So I think we'll leave it there, because it's a happy note, at least in the sense that if it does get people thinking about how we have a say on these things democratically, then that to me is a good outcome. But this is definitely a technology that is further up the scale towards Skynet, I think, than 100%. Others have been. And I just really hope to be wrong. But there's plenty of other technologies that we really need now, and there's really very little to be lost in applying them. But this one, let's slow it down.
Yeah. Take it easy. Go meditate, Dave. You're looking stressed.
Yeah, I think I need to after this episode.